Hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is LaDante King with Launch Student Success, and we are having this podcast conversation discussion today with the one and only Dr. Alejandra DeLaCruz Hong. Ali is a wonderful friend of mine. We go back and we are doing this session today really to give folks an insight into, how she got into student affairs and higher ed and her background. But really, we are looking to highlight amazing women here during Women's History Month. And so Ali is one of the first that we wanted to highlight during this month. So Dr. Alejandra de la Cruz Hong, welcome, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Right on. So, folks, real quick, Dr. Alejandra de la Cruz Hong, Dr. Ali, as she is called by her students and colleagues on campus at the University of Southern California. She serves as the Student Equity and Inclusion Programs Director. Her portfolio includes Student Basic Needs, Veterans Resource Center, and First Generation Plus Success Center, which oversees it services first generation students, undocumented students, transfers, and former foster youth. So she's doing amazing work on that campus and in the field, and it is an honor to have her with us for a brief conversation today. So, Dr. Ali, if you don't mind, and we know that with all of that you're doing there, that doesn't include all that who you are. Would you mind giving us just a little brief insight into who Dr. Ali is?
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. Where do I even start? I am a Latina. I am a mom of two. I'm a wife. I'm an educator. I've been in the field of student affairs for 19 years now, which feels impossible. I was a first generation college student. I'm first generation in this country. My mom was a teen mom. I always mention that. She doesn't love that I always mention that, but I think it's so important that my story starts with my mom and everything that she did for me and my two siblings. So I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. I grew up in Long Beach, California, which is something I'm super proud of. I went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergrad. Also, very, very proud to be a gaucho.
Ole.
I did my grad work at Cal State Northridge, and then I got my doctorate here at USC. So I'm very, very proud of my educational journey and the schools and institutions that I've been a part of, because I just think they do such great work, and I love being a small part of that.
Right on. Amazing. Right. And so for those of you who some of you may see this and know, obviously, that Ali and I actually used to work together at UC Santa Barbara in housing, and actually went to school together. We overlapped, right? And so went to school together at UC Santa Barbara, also then became professionals at UCSB as well. And so, amazing times in regards to being um, first generation students coming into PWIs, right? And so
From similar
hopefully,
neighborhoods?
say it again.
From similar neighborhoods?
Yes,
You
for
grew up
sure.
there to where I grew up?
Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm born in Compton, California, grew up in Carson, and so we came from some areas that didn't necessarily teach us all the things that we needed to know to be successful in school, and we had to learn along the way. And so, Ali, if you don't mind, can you share with us, just growing up, right, middle school, high school, what was your impression of going to college? Did you have a college-going environment around you, whether it be at school, with family?
Okay, so stay with me on this journey. When
Okay,
I wrote my first paper in my doctorate, we had to get a pseudonym for a college that we were writing about, and I chose Hillman College from a different world, because that was my first introduction to college life and what I thought college was.
Dope.
That was it. Growing up, a different world. To this day, if it's on, I will stop and watch it. one of my favorite shows.
That's
And then
amazing.
in high school, or when I got to college, my RA introduced himself to me and he was like, I'm your RA, this is what I do. And I was like, I know because I watch Felicity. They have RAs on that show, so I totally knew. But really, that was what shaped a lot of my impression of college was 90s TV.
Yeah.
I did have a few of my life mentors who I grew up with in church who went to college, went to Cal State Long Beach, and they were the ones who were like, you have to go to college. You have to, like, you're a smart girl, you're dedicated, you have to do it. And so my dear family friend John, I remember we sat down, we were filling out my college applications, and I was like, I don't even know where to start. And he is like, you are first generation, that goes a long way. So even back then, I had this like title of, okay, first gen, I'm the first in my family to go. And he's like, you have a great story. Not a lot of people from your high school go to four-year colleges, like just try. And I tried and I somehow got in, and it was not always easy.
Mhm.
Like you said, we had to learn a lot, but we also had to teach each other a lot. There was so much that I just didn't know, that I wasn't equipped for. I didn't have the study skills. I didn't have um, a lot of the wealth that I saw around me at UC Santa Barbara. What I had was my family. I had friends. Like I said, at the time, I was very involved in my church. So I had those folks. I remember people from my church would send me dollar bills so I could do my laundry. So I
Yeah.
never, for the first year, I never had to worry about paying for laundry because my church people would send me like $5 or $6. And it was so awesome. And those are the things that now I look back on and I'm like, I never took that for granted because that meant so much. And that's when, we talk about things like social capital and cultural capital and, our first gen students coming to campus with these rich, valuable resources that don't equate to dollars all the time, right? That don't equate to
Yeah.
economic wealth. We have so much to offer and so much to draw from. Yeah, that was my impression of going to college and sort of a little bit of my how I got acclimated, I guess.
Hey, right on, right on. So when you came to UCSB, who would you say is like, uh, let's say not the one, but one person who was like significant in your experience in that first year, mind you, and just for everyone, right? We know that if we were to go an hour, you could list a ton of people, right? But
One.
can, right, like, so if you were to just highlight one that had a huge impact on your first year experience coming in.
So difficult because I am a person who loves to be in community. I love to be connected to folks. I don't even know if I can pick one from my first year. I would have
And and I'll say, let me just say this: it doesn't have to be a professional. It could be, someone that was on your same hall or someone that was in the community, like you said. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily a faculty or staff member.
that's even harder.
Uh,
No person. I mean, it would have to be my RA at the time. He was the first person who was like, get involved. I moved in before the halls actually opened because I worked at our dining hall. I lasted all of like 2.5 weeks, but I got to move in early. It was the first time I had seen the campus. I never went to visit the campus until the day I moved in. Um, I just had seen pictures and I was like, this is it. This is my number one school. By the beach. I like the water. It's 2 hours away, so I could take the Greyhound. My mom will never just surprise me.
oh,
Like, done deal.
okay.
And so
Good.
day one, he was making posters. And he was like, right away, I was like, do you want help? I had nothing else to do. And he's like, sure. So my roommate and I started helping to make posters and to put up like our door decks. And he bought us pizza and wild bread from Woodstocks, which became a staple in my diet.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
And he was like, we have this thing called hall government. You should be our hall rep. I was like, great, I'll do it. And from there, I met so many people, and it just gave me like a connection to the campus that I would not have had otherwise. My assistant resident director at the time is someone that I am still friends with and connected with. He wrote my letters of recommendation for my doctoral program a few years ago. And that really like started my career. And I worked at UC Santa Barbara for a decade. I grew up there personally and professionally. I went to college when I was 17. And so I became an adult there, and my RA introducing me to this leadership opportunity within housing and residential life really opened up every single avenue for my entire career.
Right on. It's a trip when you talk about how you made the decision. This past week, decisions were released for the UCs, right? So we see all
Yes.
folks like get accepted, get denied, and every time this year, it reminds me as well. I'm just like, wow, how lucky are we? Because I made the decision to come to UCSB the same way. Like I got into UCSB, UC Riverside, and I chose UCSB because I had been to Santa Barbara once when I was like in elementary school, knew that it was by the beach,
Yeah.
had never been to campus, but I knew that Riverside was hot. And I didn't want to go to Riverside. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be where it was hot. So I said, I'm going to Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Well,
Right? Knew nothing.
I remember the day I got my letter because, back then it was still an envelope. I saw the big envelope and I was like, oh my God, I know what this means. I remember everything I was wearing. My best friend was with me. I screamed, I jumped, I cried. I was so happy. And then my mom said, you're not going. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not going? She was like, you're not mature enough. You're too codependent. She's like, you don't even cross the street by yourself. What are you thinking? She's like, you need to mature. She was like, I think you need a little more time at home. You're only 17. Go to Long Beach City College for 2 years. So that was the plan for a few weeks. And then I saw my high school counselor and I was like, I'm not going to go. Because she was like, did you turn everything in? How's it going? I was like, I'm not going. My mom said no. And she's like, your deadline is tomorrow. It has to be postmarked by tomorrow. And I was like, I know, but I don't have the money because you had to send in like a deposit. I was like, I don't have the money. I haven't filled anything out. And she was like, I will make a phone call. My best friend works in financial aid. She called, she got me a waiver. We filled it out right then and there. And she like, just send it in tomorrow. So I waited until my mom went to work. I filled out the paperwork. I called her and I said, I need your social security number because I'm going to Santa Barbara and I'm turning in my paperwork today. And there was silence on the other line. And then she said, okay. And she started giving me her number and I was like, oh my God.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I almost didn't go. But I was like, no. And again, when we think about those like pivotal moments that you don't think of as pivotal, like had I not walked down that hallway at that time and seen Miss Ortega, I would not have gone to Santa Barbara. I would be at City College for a couple of years. And then who knows what would have happened, right?
Dope.
Yeah.
Where's Miss Ortega now? Do you know?
I don't know. I wish I knew.
Okay. Right. Right. Thinking about students when they transition into that transition process, would you say for you that was like the moment that you became an adult by making that decision for yourself?
I don't even feel like an adult now.
Okay.
Oh my God, I pay my taxes and I have kids and I don't feel like an adult, but
Hey, that's real.
right. I think that was the start of it for sure. But I was my parents never had let me have a job in high school. I didn't drive. I was for the place where I grew up in, I was pretty sheltered in some of those ways. Like I wasn't as independent as a lot of other people who had jobs, had cars, had like plans. I didn't know what I was going to major in. I went in as a comms major, never took one single comms class. I feel like it took me a while to like get my stuff together. I don't think it was until I graduated college that I started to feel like, okay, I'm an adult now. Maybe my junior year, actually, once I like studied in Mexico for a month in the summer, had to get summer housing, had to figure out, where I was going to live, if I was going to be an RA again, like those sorts of things, I think started to cement that for me. I don't think that it was a decision to go to college. I think that was almost like more of a rebellious act, right? And then it started to set in a little bit after.
Dope. Right on. So, graduating from UCSB,
Yes.
what was that transition process like, right? Like we know that there's a lot of things that goes into the transition of coming into higher ed, but then when you were coming out, or as far as the undergraduate experience, but then coming out, what was that process like for you?
So I walked in 2003, but I still had 2 classes to finish that I didn't finish for another 3 years. So
Okay.
that was something that I was just, I don't know, like embarrassed about, didn't take the initiative to like finish, want to talk to people about it, right? Did not use my resources, the whole thing. So that first year after I walked, I was at home and I was asked to do a couple of like temporary RA positions back at UCSB. So I did that. I applied to be an assistant resident director because you could be a few units short. My plan was to go back and finish the classes, and I didn't. So I did that for 2 years. And then the next job I wanted, my boss, Lisa, was like, you have to enroll in these classes if I'm even going to interview you. And I was like, done. It was the fire I needed. I went, talked to the counselors. I think I talked to Jack Rivas.
Good
Got
old Jack.
good old Jack. Got everything situated, went back, got the job, did my summer courses. And then as soon as I was done with my summer courses, there was a graduate program that was through Cal State Northridge. There's a satellite in Goleta for working professionals. And I was like, well, let me try it. And I got in and I started doing that almost right away. And I felt really lucky to find that at that time. I did that with one of my best friends, Maritza, and it was awesome. It was just exactly what I needed at that time to sort of keep that momentum going.
Shout out to Maritza and Shalana. We'll just throw those in there.
Yeah.
Right? Amazing. And 2 other amazing women, you know. So grad school, like what was grad school like for you? Why did you go into grad school? Obviously you wanted to, continue to pursue your education, but like in regards to research, like what did you go into your grad school program for?
Yeah. So I realized really early on that if I didn't have a master's degree, I wasn't going to get very far in higher ed. And I had a chip on my shoulder about it. I was like, I have all the practice. Like, I can do this. And that's still true. But there were people with degrees who knew the theory and who knew like the history and who knew all these other things that I just didn't have or I hadn't learned in that way. And so they were always going to have an edge over me. And so that's when I got my master's. And from there, I was like, I have to get a doctorate. At the time, something like 0.2% of Latinos had a doctorate. And I was like, I need to be one of those people. We need to raise those numbers. It has always been really important for me to be someone that people can look to and be like, well, if she can do it, then I can do it. Because the only thing that I have is discipline. I'm a smart girl, but I'm not a genius. I'm not like school doesn't come super easy to me, but I am a really hard worker. I have a really strong work ethic and I'm super disciplined. And if you tell me that I can't do something, I'm gonna do everything to prove you wrong and I'm gonna do it, right? As long as I have at least a little investment in it. And so for me, I was like, well, if I've gotten this far, I'm just going to go do the doctorate. And it took me a while, but I did it, and I knew I wanted to do it here at USC. I did a part-time program. It took me 5 years. When I started, my daughters were 1 and 3. I also knew, like, for them, they had to see me do it. They had to see me go after something that I wanted, to continue my education, to just live in a college-going home, right? Um, I didn't know what I wanted to study for a long time, and then during the pandemic, I decided to study Latina moms in student affairs and how they handled their personal and professional lives, because everything was so intertwined and convoluted, and we were doing so much for our students and our families and our communities. And in that, I was like, you know, we've already seen the change, I think, in higher ed, and, the sort of pressure that mounts with, students and their mental health, students and their basic needs. It's the rising cost of college that impacts all of that. And so I was like, and now we're all trapped inside our homes, having to do all of this for everyone. And it was a really, really great project. I think it was really meaningful for me. It was really meaningful for my participants. And I think it has, really helped me in how I view my work and how I view my colleagues and how I just think about scholarship and research, and how there could be so much about any topic, but only you can go in and put a twist on it or figure it out. And my dissertation, I think, is like 176 pages long. 40 of that is references.
Okay.
But I was like, I don't think I ever wrote more than like 20 pages in my life. How could I do this? So every time I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I did that. I'm a scholar. I recently wrote a chapter in a book edited by my friend Rocio about Latinas in higher ed, all about being a chingona, aka a badass. And that, I think, happened because I have my doctorate, and I was confident enough to say, like, yes, I know how to research, I know how to pull in theory and articles and weave that into my practice and into what I'm writing and what I'm saying.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, a couple things in regards to your research. And I know we talked about this prior to this podcast here. What is the title of your dissertation?
The full title. I wish you had prepped me for this.
Oh,
because I don't have the full title, but it's titled It Was a Shit Show: How Latina Moms in Student Affairs Navigated Their Personal and Professional Worlds During the Pandemic.
Wonderful.
Really.
Yes.
The second part is not so specific, but the first part is, it was a shit show.
For sure. Yes.
When I defended my dissertation, when I defended my proposal, I really had to defend pieces of it because I wanted to do testimonio, which is really about like people's first person narratives. And it's grounded in a bunch of other like radical research and epistemology, but I will leave it at that. And then photo elicitation. I wanted photos from my participants to highlight what the pandemic sort of signified and symbolized for them. And I really had to defend that choice. And so at my final defense, they were like, we're so glad you kept the pictures. Like, that was a good call. They're like, but we want you to change the title. It was in Spanish, and it was supposed to be basically motherhood in the time of the pandemic, a play on love in the time of cholera. And I jokingly said, I should have titled it was a shit show, because every participant at some point was like, the only way I can describe it is that it was a shit show. And like committee was like, change the title. They're like, the whole thing is a little irreverent. It's, talking about how you can't keep putting all this pressure on us. You can't keep giving us more and more and expecting this. And that's what happened during the pandemic. And this is what happens. It becomes too much. So at some point, we have to take back the power, or the structure has to change, like something has to give, right? They're
Mhm.
like, that is what the participants said. Put it in quotation marks, put it like, make that your title. And I'm like,
Yes.
hell yeah.
Yes.
I love it. It's very me. When people are like, oh, put your dissertation title on your resume, I'm like, I don't know if that's like the very first thing I want people to know because I
But see,
can't explain it, right?
well, that's the thing. It's like when you first told me about the title, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I want to know more. Like, wait a minute, how did you, right? And why did you? And starts asking those
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And the reason why I ask it even here, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, but
No, I
I
love it.
appreciate, right? I wanted you to explain it's because so many people think that getting their master's, getting their PhD, working in higher ed has to be this rigid,
Mhm.
traditional type of environment. And to know, like, oh, I can write something and title it and be that creative within higher ed, in these learning spaces. Like, I want people to know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah.
that,
So when
for sure.
I have a few people that I've read that have just like really anchored my leadership and how I think about scholarship. And one of them is Bell Hooks, All About Love. I was like, yes, that is me. Oh my God. Like, love that. And the other was Jeff Duncan Andrade. And when I read his work, it was all about cariño and authentic care, and all in like really accessible language, and talking about like just how there are different types of smartness, right?
Hmm.
And like your scholarship doesn't have to be this really unattainable, um, just elitist like brand.
Hmm.
Um, and so once I started reading more, theorists and scholars and people that did work that reflected where I grew up, sort of how I thought about my own intelligence and my own place in the world, I was like, oh yeah, I can do. I can do it like this, and that doesn't take away from what it means to be in academia, right? It
Right.
contributes to that.
Right.
It's part of that like
That.
code switching that we have to do all the time.
Yes.
Um, and it's also part of breaking that and saying like, yes, I could have left off that part. I could have just said, how Latina moms did this and that. But let's break that up a little bit. Let's challenge that and push back on that a little bit, because everything I said in there and everything I wrote in there was true for those women and true based on the research and what's going on in the context of the world.
Mhm. Most definitely. Most definitely. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Um, in light of, as we are going to tie this up here, in light of where you came from, as far as your hometown, how you were taught or not taught about college, right?
Mhm.
Coming in, having your first year experience, making the transition into your junior, senior year, getting into higher ed as a professional, then as a graduate student, now as Dr. Alley, right? Working um, at University of Southern California. What would be one thing that you would share with, let's take leaders, faculty, and staff that you feel is important to build trust with today's students? And here's why I say leaders, faculty, and staff. When we talk about leaders, traditionally in regards to like institutional policy, right?
Mhm.
In regards to faculty, instruction in the classroom. And then with regards to staff or coordinators or directors of programs or resources that are provided. Could you give maybe just your thought, maybe one or two things that you would share with each of those audiences uh, that can help build trust and engagement with today's students?
I think for all of them, it would be that students are experts in their own lives. And so I think when we try to come up with solutions, policies, programs, services, and we're not including students, that's a disservice. We're going to waste our time. We're going to waste our money. We're going to waste our resources. And really, it's their time and their resources that we're wasting, right?
Yeah.
So students know what they need. They don't always understand the limitations that we have as administrators, as faculty, as staff, but there has to be solutions that include them. There has to be collaboration and communication with these students. I think that as much honesty and transparency that we can offer them, the better. That's how you build that trust, right? And I know there's a lot that we cannot share with students. I know that there's a lot that can, backfire or that is just not helpful to share. But I think as much as we can, that is really helpful. And also letting students know a little bit more about who we are and how we've come to the work and expressing our intentions, because I think that's how you earn their trust, right? I always say I was a student activist at UC Santa Barbara. And when I applied for my first full-time role, one of the questions that was asked was, you have been fighting the man this whole time, but now you're the man. So what are you going to do?
Mm.
I'm like,
Yep.
I'm on the inside now.
Ah,
Share that with my students to say, like, those values and those ideals that I had as a student, like a lot of them I still believe in, I still agree with. But knowing more about the context of how institutions work, how budgets work, how uh, where we can push back, where we can't push back, how politics and allyship work on a campus, I'm better equipped to make those decisions. And I still need that communication with those student activists. I still need that communication with those students who are not activists but have really strong opinions, because they're all contributing to the community.
right on. Dope. Thank you so much. As we close this out, what would be one thing that you would like to share that hasn't been shared yet? A lasting thought, impression in regards to just increasing student success.
No, I shared a lot.
Go back and read the transcript, folks.
I think really success is going to look different for each student. I think anything that we can do to put the onus on the institution to hold our students accountable for the goals that they set for themselves, and to really be a support system for them while they are here, and beyond, right? Being that sustainable sort of mentorship, coaching. I think that's where we need to focus, the way that, at least that's how I like to focus my leadership, right? I remember when you and I were working together, every time you would see a student that you connected with, you would ask them how their 4.0 was going.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
was in 2004. So
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
so those pieces of like, I believe in you. I believe that you are the most brilliant. You are the hardest worker. You're going to achieve every dream that you have for yourself. How can I help you get there? Whether that's an encouraging word, whether that's writing a letter of recommendation, sitting down with a student, connecting them to someone that, who's in their same industry, like all those things are things that we can easily do for our students to help their success. And it means so much to them.
Restore. Can I share one thing with you? I thank you for sharing that little remembrance, right?
Yeah.
Even just talking about how us as professionals within higher ed need to change with the times, right?
Yeah.
I no longer come at students and ask them about their 4.0 GPA,
Right.
because I also learned that to your point about like not every student defines success by their GPA.
Right.
And that was a transition for me over the past few years, that, oh, okay, then my engagement with them is, how do you define success? It's even
Mhm.
just asking them, to your point, right? Like, students know what they want and what
Yep.
they need to succeed. So I lead with that question,
Yeah.
right? So that they can tell me. And
Yeah.
then I may then ask them, would you even like to have a 4.0 GPA? Because
Right.
some people probably don't want it. Great, then we can talk about something else that you do want, right? And
Yeah.
so
Let
I
me,
learned that I was putting that pressure on them, right? So
yeah,
yeah, please.
absolutely. I will out myself to say that I graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA. Don't know how I got into any UC. I graduated college with a 2.8 GPA. Don't know how I got into a master's program. Then I was like, oh, I should probably take this more seriously.
Uh-huh.
Then I had a 3.7 and then I got a 4.0 in my
Mhm.
doctorate program, which I worked very hard for every single one of those days.
Yeah.
But to your point, I had all these other things that I had to do that I had never really done before. All these other things that I was working through and navigating and building upon, right? So that grade
Mhm.
was never important to me
Mhm.
until I got to graduate school. And then I was like, okay, let me focus on that.
For
But
sure.
yeah,
For
you're
sure.
right. We evolve in that and change that because we think we have, and we have the best of intentions.
Mhm.
Um, but students are the experts on their own lives, and we get to learn that as we grow as professionals, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So, and we were right in alignment because yeah, 2.73 out of high school, 2.8 out of UCSB.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still needed to finish up my Spanish class. I walked in '01, but didn't do it for 2 years.
See?
Finished in '03. Right. I was
Yes.
embarrassed. I didn't want
Yes.
to tell nobody.
Yes.
Like,
I think I told our mom it 2 years ago. Yeah.
right.
I mean,
So,
a lot of people that I know don't know that I took this 3-year gap for 2 classes. Like,
mhm,
what was I doing? What was I
what we're doing.
thinking? I
Right.
just didn't know. I just
Right.
didn't. Yeah. And that's okay because now I like own it. It's part of my story. It's part of my yeah, it's just part of my story. It's part of my
Yeah.
authentic truth of what was happening at the time.
Yep. For sure. For sure. Dr. Ali,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I know and for sure that folks who see this are definitely going to be inspired, whether it be high school students, whether it be college age students, new professionals in the field. Like, continue to impact lives as you always have. It's an honor to be connected with you, and thank you so much for your time and sharing some of your
Um,
knowledge with us today.
I
All right,
appreciate you. Thank you.
for sure. Thank you.